Thanks for listening to the latest Beyond the Backfall podcast, available on YouTube and all podcast platforms. Subscribe now so you don't miss a single episode.
Welcome back to Beyond the Back Four, where today we're talking England and whether or not Thomas Tuchel's side are slowly building momentum, moving in the right direction and on the way to winning the World Cup, or if in fact the performance at Villa Park on Saturday were signs that things are not right and maybe the team has regressed since the German took over from Sir Gareth Southgate, to use his full title. With me today are Graeme Bailey, Kieran Maguire and Mark Clattenburg. Let's go straight into it. So, Graeme, just give me your thoughts on the game.
Pretty turgid, I think is a good word for it. But, you know, it was, I spoke to someone close to the England camp a few days ago, and it's like, you know, let's see, when in that first game, wherever it may be next summer in Chicago, Miami, Los Angeles, are we really going to remember what happened at Villa Park? Are we going to remember what happened at the City Ground when we lost to Senegal? And intrinsically, we're not. So, you know, we're just getting through these group stages now. I think the Serbia game, which we'll talk about in a bit, is going to be fascinating this midweek. I think it's got a real knockout qualifier feel to it. It's going to be really two good teams playing, which I think this is intrinsically the problem, isn't it? You know, England against a bunch of part-timers. Does it matter if we win 2-0 or 8-0? Probably not at the end of the day.
I suppose, Mark, to bring you in on that, from a referee's perspective, in terms of like elite performance, in a game where there's less pressure, do you as a referee, do you go, yeah, it wasn't my best game, but it wasn't the World Cup final, so it doesn't really matter? Like, do you want to find consistency as soon as possible?
Yeah, I think you want to be, it doesn't matter who the opposition is, or even when I was, for example, refereeing, I remember refereeing in a qualifying match, Denmark-Liechtenstein. Everybody knew Denmark was going to win, but it's an important game for both teams. You know, if we look at England as an example, it was a bore fest, and you're right, the results don't really make any difference, but it does because it's the performance. I think watching England over the last few weeks and the last, you know, months since Thomas Tuchel took over, there doesn't seem to be any cohesion against, you know, togetherness. There's no, you know, it's all right saying the buzzwords, but the performances are now worse now than they were under Sir Gareth Southgate. And I think that's where the concerns are as an England fan going forward. You know, it's a tournament. You know, the tournament's important, but we want to see performances. Results, yeah, are not so important if you're winning, but we want to see good performances.
Kieran, I imagine you're sat there, you're panicked, you're thinking there's no finance to talk about here. You remind us all the time you're just a fan. You don't want your opinion to count too strongly. So to bring you in, I'm going to throw some stats your way, and then you can analyse the data for us and come back with a fan's perspective. So this is the second time that Thomas Tuchel's England have beaten Andorra. We beat them 1-0 in June. But in the time frame, so in the second game, shots were down 20-11. Big chances were down from 6-4. Touches in the opposition box were down from 52-41, while expected goals were down from 4 to 2.21. Now, obviously, we did score twice as many goals. We won 2-0 ahead of 1-0. But does that suggest that maybe there is some complacency creeping in, or maybe we aren't seeing the best of this England side still? And should that therefore be a worry because we are only a year away, or less than a year away from the tournament?
I must confess, I'm actually very relaxed about all of this. I've still got the scars of coming back from Berlin from last year because I had tickets for the final against Spain, and that was really painful. As an England fan, first of all, you want England to qualify. I'm old enough to remember 1974, 1978, 1994, various Euros as well. So if England get there, that's fine. Tournament football is completely different from what is a glorified training session, and that's what this is. So yeah, it wasn't good. Nobody's put themselves into the final 23, 25 for next year, and nobody's taken themselves out because I think they were equally mediocre. So it's just one of those things. And as an England fan, you get used to forgetting England performances very, very quickly.
To build on what you said at the beginning, Graeme, do you think even if let's say we get to the World Cup final, for example, who knows if we win, but even if we play like we played at the weekend in the group matches, in the knockout matches, would anybody care?
A little, obviously, we saw through the Gareth Southgate era, performances did count. At the end of the day, at national level, it's all about results. But yeah, performances do count. I think with Thomas Tuchel, I think for me, it's not so much performances; it's what's around it. It's his squad selection, and his comments around the squad. Where I was reading either before the Serbia game or the Andorra game, where he was talking about his four options in midfield. I've got here, he says, at the moment, the four players competing in central midfield are Jordan Henderson, Declan Rice, Elliot Anderson, and Ruben Loftus-Cheek. And he goes on, but it's like, why is Thomas Tuchel selecting Jordan Henderson and Ruben Loftus-Cheek? The fact he's picking these players, that's what worries me, Sam. I think around it, I looked at some of the results around the big teams like the France and the Portugals, where you can see what they're doing with the squads. Even Germany, you can see him bring the youth players on. I don't see where Thomas Tuchel's selection's going here. I don't, is he... Elliot Anderson is great. He was part of the Euros, and he wasn't part of the summer one. We've seen Curtis Jones dropped from selection recently, even though he started the season pretty well with Liverpool. I'm just, that's what worries me more, is the selection and around it. And yeah, we are, no matter what he does, we are going to qualify for the World Cup. Let's not beat around the bush. There's 48 countries going to this World Cup finals, and we will be one of them. But yeah, I do have a worry about what Thomas Tuchel's doing and the way we're playing. And yeah, that's just more my worry, Sam, about what we're seeing here, is the stuff around Thomas Tuchel and this squad. It doesn't fill me with confidence.
I don't want to create a debate in which we're just digging out Thomas Tuchel, but I do want to follow on what you're saying. So, Mark, there's a theory around the appointment of Thomas Tuchel that he's here just to win the World Cup. He's got a short-term contract. This is his first stint in international management. He's a man who wants to win trophies. There's a very good chance that he is just looking at that World Cup and then game over. We know that Gareth Southgate, from his very first day, was much more interested in the culture around the English men's football team and trying to improve the relationship between the players, the media, and the fans. Is there a danger that a lot of the good work from Gareth Southgate off the pitch gets undone in the pursuit of that short-term glory, and then that younger players who, like Graeme is talking about, won't get chances, and maybe if we don't win the World Cup, we're putting a lot of eggs in this particular basket?
Yeah, and I think that's, the major decision for me is with the FA board. The FA board made the decision of Thomas Tuchel, not, it was, they saw, and they should have done the due diligence on his performances at Chelsea, Munich, for example. What they saw, they must have saw something in that, because what they'd seen with Gareth Southgate, if you remember when Gareth Southgate came into the England setup, it wasn't great, but what he did, he repaired a lot of stuff behind, because we saw, for example, international players, I refereed matches where the players wouldn't even speak to each other. The Man United and Liverpool players wouldn't communicate. Even in the tunnel, there was that much rivalry between. So when they went to play for England, you never saw that togetherness, where I thought Gareth Southgate did that wonderfully well during his time as England manager. And that increased with performances. I thought the performances were good. They weren't great, but we had some luck along the way in tournaments where we got easier passages. That's tournament football. But in the end, they fell short. But with Thomas Tuchel, for example, he called out immediately Jude Bellingham, which was a bizarre statement to make, but he's done it for a reason, and there's only him knows that reason. And if he thinks calling players out at international level is going to work, I've never seen this before at international level. Yes, club, because they pay your wages, but players are playing for England because they want to play for England. It's not financially because the clubs pay their salaries, but I just don't see with Thomas Tuchel at the moment where England national team is going. And I'm all for, yes, it's important, and I hear some comments that it's a build up to the World Cup, but you have to have at some point. It's about peaking. And if you look at Spain before they won the last Euro, Spain were coming through a wonderful period, and then they peaked. And I can't see, where's the peak at England? Is it going to be, well, we relying again and again the peak to be in a tournament, because unfortunately tournament football has surprises, and you end up not seeing that peak. I think the peak has to start before, and at the moment the team selection leaves a lot to be desired when you're looking at Ruben Cheek to be brought into the squad again after so many years. Is that moving the club, the national team forward? I don't believe it is.
I bet you're delighted that former Sunderland man Jordan Henderson's in there then.
Yeah, I haven't got. Listen, sometimes you need players in the dressing room that aren't going to play. I think is Jordan and Henderson in the England squad as a player who can come in and help with the dressing room. I don't think Jordan. You looked at Jordan Henderson. When he left Liverpool, he's gone to Saudi Arabia. It didn't work out. He's gone to Ajax. Not really worked out. He's gone to Brentford. And all of a sudden, he's straight back into the England squad. I think Gareth Southgate was moving these players away, and Thomas Tuchel seems to have brought them back in. And there seems to be that, I don't know if is it trying to fix something that doesn't need to be fixing? Because I think as an England fan, we want to see exciting football again. I think we've saw some of Gareth Southgate where we got a little bit bored, and now I'm at that same point watching England as a fan. I'm bored again, and I need some of that excitement. I want some of that youth that we have allowed to play. And I thought Thomas Tuchel would allow the players to play and express themselves, but we're going backwards again.
Let's talk about the positives, though. Elliot Anderson, you mentioned earlier, Graham. How impressed were you with him on his debut?
Yeah, he's a wonderful talent. Obviously, we don't want to rub salt in the wound for Mark and Newcastle, but to be fair, Newcastle, they knew what a talent he was. They really did. It's not as if they gave him away and didn't have much of a choice about it. Elliot Anderson was a fantastic player who showed in glimpses at Newcastle on loan spells. They knew what a talent he was. And I love the fact he's come in, and I think it does lend ourselves to the point in the youth thing. We're talking Thomas Tuchel. I still go back to Lee Carsley, where we talk about this St George's Park project in the Southgate, where we had that next option to come in. I know he didn't do well in his interview stage, so to speak, and that's why he lost the job. But yeah, I love the fact that Elliot Anderson is in there. I think it's great, and more of the same, really. I think from the Euro teams, Livramento is included. Have we seen enough of that Euro winning team come through? Possibly not. Well, we'll see where we go. But I think Anderson is really state to claim for a place in the squad. But he's done that with his Premier League performances. He's been outstanding since he arrived at Nottingham Forest throughout the last 10 months, 12 months. And I think I will applaud Tuchel for that. He's recognising someone who's had a brilliant 12 months and is playing well. But if you're going to do that, then go down that route. Don't just suddenly pick Ruben Loftus-Cheek for 2 games at Milan. He hasn't had a good 12 months. So, let's have some consistency. If you are going to pick on form, great, pick on form. But then it can't be haphazard. And Southgate got caught out a bit by this as well. You're either going to pick on form or you're going to pick on reputation. Or if you pick on both, tell us. So some players are going to earn the place because of reputation. Some players are going to earn the place because of club form. Be honest with us. Tell us.
Do you think he needs to explain that?
I think in terms of some of the selections he's made, I do, yeah. I think as he's talked about the four midfielders, I think ahead of Serbia, he's got Jordan Henderson, Declan Rice, Elliot Anderson and Ruben Loftus-Cheek. I honestly think if you took a straw poll of 1,000 Premier League fans, name your 4 midfielders who might be available for Serbia, you wouldn't have come up with that 4.
Let's talk about Andorra's low block, Mark. Do you think one problem is maybe, and we're all being hypercritical of England because we expect so much, but loads of teams around the world, especially a team like the England team where there's players, there's no Cole Palmer, there's no Bukayo Saka, teams struggle against a low block. It does its job, and teams often are slightly stifled, and we've still won 2-0 very comfortably. It just wasn't super creative. Do you think there's an element of that in there?
Yeah, but that's where the England coach has to, and his backroom staff have to understand. He knew how Andorra were going to play. Andorra aren't going to come to England and try and play an attacking game. He knew he had to, and that was where I thought his selection of Anderson was clever. I thought because Anderson at Nottingham Forest, where he's been playing, he's been trying to open teams up with passes. I remember the Chris Wood goal recently, where it was a wonderful pass by Anderson on the shoulder, and bang, Nottingham Forest scored. And I think he wants more of that. He wants to open teams up. The problem I see with England, there's not many players can do that. Is he trying to play with Anderson with Rice to give Rice a bit more protection to allow them to play? And he's trying to find a team that can open teams up. Gone to the pass where you'll see, for example, Kane on the shoulder of the last defender. It doesn't seem to happen. One comes short, one goes long. I watched Rashford trying to get in behind when Kane came short. He is trying to open teams up, but has he got the right selection to do that? Or have we, got the players that we used to look at years ago, your Peter Beardsley's, your Gazas, all of these players used to be able to open teams up. Steven Gerrard, Lampard. We don't seem to have that type of midfielder now that can seem to open that low block up. I think we're great with speed. When teams are coming at us, we can come at them. But when we've got that low block, we seem to struggle getting it in and around and getting the other side of that defence where we can cross it and we get a simple goal. That's where we struggle.
I saw you nodding there, Kieran.
Yeah, I agree entirely with Mark. How many England players can we name that take on defenders, that try to get past people? Everything is drilled towards creating an overlap and then squaring the ball from there for somebody to go and put in. And that's a legacy of what we've seen since Pep's come into English football, which has changed the culture. But everybody's now doing it, and therefore everybody's worked out how to defend against it. And it is predictable. It is, as Graeme said, it's turgid. It's not exciting stuff. But I can't recall many exciting football matches this season because there's been an awful lot of these. This is what happens when you lose possession. Everybody drops into their positions. I think for the poorer teams, the less talented teams, that responsibility is given to them to an even greater degree, and that's all that they practice. And Andorra would have gone away, and I suspect they'll be very happy with the result.
So obviously we know, I mentioned a couple of players earlier that were injured that are players that, Cole Palmer loves taking people on, Saka too. Jack Grealish obviously not injured, and since he's been away from Pep Guardiola, suddenly we've seen a bit more of the old Jack Grealish. He has been taking people on in an Everton shirt, and I think he's got 4 assists in his last 2 appearances or something like that. Is he the sort of player you'd want to see back in the England squad?
I love Jack Grealish. I think he's... I had the misfortune to go to Everton versus Brighton to see the first match as a Brighton fan, but he was the difference, along with Danny Welbeck deciding to do a back pass instead of a penalty.
It was a soft penalty, that's fair. Graeme, let's talk about Serbia. Would you make differences? Do you want to see differences in terms of the starting lineup, or do you think we'll see much of the same?
I find it hard, really, even to have that opinion. I really don't know what Thomas Tuchel's about, Sam. I don't know whether is he just trying to win this game? Is he looking towards America with this squad? Because it's strange where we all assumed that he might go to a back three with this system, but he hasn't done that. Again, maybe the lack of central defensive options for him maybe causes that. To be fair to him, it's going to be fascinating to see what he does. I don't think he's got too many options with the squad he's picked. We talk about those midfielders that Kieran and Mark were alluding to. Morgan Gibbs-White has not been given a chance under Thomas Tuchel. He's one of the best attacking midfielders we've seen. We talk about midfield. Unfortunately for Thomas Tuchel, it's not his fault. Phil Foden is going through a period of his career that he really needs to get himself going to be in contention for the World Cup, and I think he will. But in the meantime, why are we not seeing more of Morgan Gibbs-White and the like? And Morgan Rogers didn't even get a start Saturday. So Ebiezi has just gone to Arsenal. He didn't start last game. Why is Morgan Rogers not getting more game time? I don't know. I think this Serbia game might be a wake up to England, because I think they're a hugely talented team. I presume the game's in Belgrade. I apologise if it's not.
It is, yeah. We'll talk about that. But yeah, it's going to be away, so it's going to be a very different occasion.
We've got an informed Dusan Vlahovic, who will be different kettle of fish than anything England have seen. And during the whole of Tuchel's reign, we played one good team. Let's not beat around the bush. He's played one good team, and that was Senegal, and they took him to the cleaners. That's
the only friendly that he's managed. His 4 competitive games, he's won 4, not conceded a goal. But yeah,
and I think Serbia are better than Senegal. So let's see what happens. I think it's going to be a really fascinating game. This will be midweek because Milinkovic, the brilliant Forest defender, is going to be marshalling that defence, and he'll be fancying his chances against Harry Kane. It's going to be a fascinating game, this one. I think England. Well, I think this will gauge, fans like me will gauge a lot of opinion about Tuchel off the back of this game. Let's see what performance he puts out. Let's see what team he picks. It's going to be a really, really good. I think it's going to be a good game.
Let's talk about it, Mark, from an atmosphere perspective. If you're playing for England on Saturday, you're playing at Villa Park, which was almost empty with 10 minutes to go because I think people had probably felt they'd seen enough. It's going to be a very different occasion away. It's probably the first occasion like this for this New England team with their new manager. Does it make a huge difference? Because we talk about it as fans and in the media all the time, like the atmosphere. But when you're actually on the pitch, obviously you've been on the pitch in these incredible atmospheres. Do you feel it, or does it all just melt away and you focus on what you're doing?
At first, you know about it because these type of countries and their spectators, they line and inside the stadiums 3-4 hours before kickoff. It's not like you see in the Premier League where the stadiums are 3/4 empty 15 minutes before kickoff. No, not in not in Serbia. I remember refereeing in Turkey is very similar. It's hostile the moment the kickoff is, but it's all about silence in the crowd. And I think, yes, Serbia is always going to be difficult. They've got history. They've got the spectators can be quite violent. The England fans certainly know this, and it'll be a very, very difficult start. But many of the players have played in these environments before, and they're so experienced. They'll cut that noise down, but it'll all be on how the score is. Because if England score the first goal, they can silence them. But if they give the Serbians something to cheer about, it'll create England players a problem, because yes, it's sometimes young players, but this sometimes makes young players. They've got to go. I remember going into these difficult environments as a referee, and it made me as a referee, because it's all right going to some of the small stadiums and the quiet stadiums and the nice stadiums, but when there's hostiles, the decision making for referees and players have to be really, really spot on, because if you give these crowd a chance to start, they can make and help Serbia win the game.
Controlling the atmosphere in Belgrade will be Clement Turpin. Is he someone we should feel confident in?
100%. Clement is a very experienced referee, Champions League final referee, and he's been in many tournaments before. And you know what? Referees love these type of appointments because it's going to be hostile. It's you know that the world media is going to watch because it's England. The referees, when I used to speak with the international referees all the time, they used to love refereeing England because it comes with a lot of pressure, and referees love that pressure. We go back. Refereeing the smaller nations, it's not so much pressure in the world media, but he'll know that the world's watching. That's why UEFA appoints such a senior and experienced referee, because they know this environment is different, because it has England travel, and always there's issues with England traveling, especially in these volatile countries. So, the UEFA have big pressure on this game, and they'll want this game to be as clean, as good as possible, regarding crowd trouble, everything else around the game. But they'll also want the game to be a good spectacle, because the world will be watching this match.
Kieran, Graeme said earlier that no one's going to get in the squad based on their performances in these games. No one's going to lose their place in the squad based on the performances in these games. But from your perspective as an England fan, who are the players you think have the most to gain from these matches?
I think the likes of Elliot Anderson, who have come into the squad, can establish themselves over the course of the next 2 or 3 games, especially if England will have they will have qualified probably effectively after this match if they win. You've got to just look at that table.
Yeah, we'll be on 15 and Serbia on 7, right?
And also, paradoxically, players who aren't in the squad, they can enhance it, because if it's another dreary performance, then your reputation improves by not being there. So, this could be excellent news for Jack Grealish, because he's got a massive fan club, especially amongst England fans. He is universally liked amongst England fans because he does something different, because he is Jack. And Jack, the Jack personality is something which I think we can all identify with. So it's a paradox that actually, by not being there in a bad performance, you can increase your chances of getting there in 12 months' time.
I wonder the reverse of the likes of Jack Grealish benefiting from people not doing necessarily well. Do Noni Madueke and Marcus Rashford, if they both start again, actually they've got potentially a huge opportunity because of the players that aren't available, because of the players that are injured. Marcus Rashford hasn't been in the squad for a while. Suddenly he's back in now. He's at Barcelona. If they play really well, that when your Cole Palmers, your Phil Fodens, your Bukayo Sakas, your Jude Bellinghams are all back in the squad, they might have made a real claim to hold their positions.
They would have to play exceptionally well, because the players you've just mentioned, as an England fan, those are the names that immediately go onto the team sheet. And then you're thinking, well, who should go? Who should be the support players? Marcus Rashford's not made a fantastic start at Barcelona as well. So I think he's benefited from injuries elsewhere. It's the same with Trent Alexander-Arnold. He's not had perhaps the start he would have liked at Real Madrid. These players have got to be able to perform at club level, because there's a danger of, if somebody comes in and has a couple of decent performances for England, then you become the forgotten man.
Okay, right. Who wants some quick fire questions? We're going to go for predictions immediately. I'll come round, we'll go in a circle. So we'll go Graeme, Mark, Kieran. So we'll start straight away. Graeme, one change the manager should make ahead of Serbia.
I think that Eze should be replaced by, as it's away from home, I think Morgan Rogers.
I would like to see a bit more. I think they're going to have to go a bit more steel in midfield. So I think he's going to, with the selection he's got, unfortunately, I think he might end up putting Jordan Henderson for a bit of protection to protect the back four against Serbia's, onslaught, as we should say, because they're going to come at England. And at the moment, I think England are quite suspect at the back, and I think he needs protection.
I don't know if he liked it or hated it, but you got a big reaction from Graeme there. Kieran, the one change.
I would bring somebody else in instead of Rashford. I just don't think he's justified his place. Who that's going to be? Morgan Rogers is a man that can come in off wide, so there's an opportunity there, and he is somebody that started off the season well.
Okay, Graeme, a player who will define Tuesday night.
I tell you what, if Mark's right and John Henderson does come in, it would be that selection for sure. I think Harry Kane.
I was going to say the same thing. I think we've got to get goals, and Harry Kane needs goals. But the problem is, it depends on the system that England want to play. Because if Harry Kane comes deep, I don't believe that's Harry Kane at his best. I think we need Harry Kane on that last line of defence, on the shoulder of the last defender. Trying to get them little balls over the top, because you're going to get a bit of space, because I think Serbia will give you that. But the other player I think will have an important role, if I'm going to pick one, would be Jordan Pickford. I think Jordan Pickford is going to have to be at his best with the onslaught, the physicality, especially at set plays and corners. I think Jordan Pickford's going to have to be at his best if we're going to keep a clean sheet.
Kieran, who's defining the night?
I agree with Mark. I think it's going to be Jordan Pickford. I think England are going to be under an awful lot of pressure. They'll be launching balls in. It will be robust. And you've got to keep the crowd calm, and I think that's where Jordan Pickford's ability to spend 45 seconds picking up the ball could come in very useful to slow things down.
Last one. So this is easy. Graeme, score prediction.
2-0 Serbia.
Wow, Mark.
I'm going to go with the way I feel about England. I'm going to go boring 0-0.
Kieran.
1-0 England. 89th minute winner.
Damn, classic. That sounds about right. Guys, thank you all so much for your time. For everybody watching, this is it. This has been this week's episode of Beyond the Back Four. We'll be back on Wednesday with an episode where we'll be discussing whether or not VAR has ruined football forever. Make sure you are subscribed and you'll get that episode when it drops. In the meantime, get in the comments below. Let us know if you think that England are moving forward under Thomas Tuchel, if that even matters, or if there's huge amounts of pressure on Harry Kane right now. We'll see you on the next one.